a machine built in a small Dutch town, secretly decides which nations lead and which fall behind.
The Chinese scientists have built a prototype machine capable of producing the world's most advanced semiconductor chips.
One building, one island, one strait. 90% of the world's most advanced microchips. The silicon that powers every smartphone, every missile guidance system, every artificial intelligence model on Earth, comes from a single island, smaller than Switzerland. And two superpowers are quietly preparing for the moment that island can no longer deliver.
To the US and China, their trade war has entered another domain. A new battle has erupted over chips.
This is not a trade dispute. This is the hidden architecture of global power, where a machine no larger than a school bus, built in a small Dutch town, dictates which nations rise and which fall behind. The chip war is already underway. Most people just haven't been told what's actually at stake. In 1990, the United States manufactured roughly 40% of the world's semiconductors. By 2021, that figure had collapsed to less than 15%.
U.S. tech company Micron says it will invest up to $100 billion over the next 20 years to build a cutting-edge chip manufacturing facility.
In a single generation, America surrendered the physical production of the technology that underpins its military, its economy, and its intelligence apparatus. The design capability stayed. The factories left. This did not happen by accident. It happened by incentive. For decades, American firms chased margin, outsourcing fabrication to partners in Taiwan and South Korea, who could build at lower cost, higher volume, and relentless precision. It was rational, it was efficient, and it created a dependency so deep that by the time strategists recognized the risk, the leverage had crossed the ocean. This is the split that defines the modern chip industry, and the vulnerability that keeps defense strategists awake at night. The United States and its closest allies still control the commanding heights of the semiconductor value chain. The design software, the intellectual property architectures, and the lithography equipment without which no advanced chip can exist. But the actual fabrication, the transformation of raw silicon into functioning processors, migrated almost entirely to East Asia. Taiwan alone now produces over 90% of all chips manufactured below 10 nanometers. The threshold that separates advanced processors from everything else. Samsung and SK Hynix in South Korea, alongside Micron's Asian facilities, dominate global memory production. The physical heart of the digital age beats in a geography smaller than most American states. Network analysts describe this structure as a small world, tightly clustered, highly efficient, and devastatingly fragile. The system handles random shocks well. A storm here, a logistics delay there, the network absorbs it. But targeted disruption of a single hub, Taiwan for logic chips, the Netherlands for lithography tools, does not degrade the system gradually. It collapses it. The architecture that makes the supply chain fast is the same architecture that makes it breakable. For decades, semiconductors moved across borders under the logic of the open market. Whoever could build cheapest sold most. That era is over. Today, the governing logic is not commerce, it is security. Policymakers in Washington now speak openly of silicon statecraft, the deliberate weaponization of supply chain dependencies to constrain a rival's technological rise. The CHIPS and Science Act, signed into law with bipartisan urgency, represents the most aggressive industrial intervention the United States has undertaken in the semiconductor sector since the Cold War. Its purpose is blunt: bring fabrication home and deny China the tools to catch up. The enforcement mechanism is even sharper. The United States has deployed extraterritorial export controls, regulations that reach beyond American borders to restrict any company anywhere in the world, from selling advanced chip-making equipment to Chinese firms if that equipment contains American technology. Semiconductors have become, in the words of researchers, a frontline instrument of geoeconomic coercion. This strategy depends on a specific bet that the choke points identified in the supply chain, design tools controlled by American firms like Synopsys and Cadence, lithography machines built exclusively by the Dutch company ASML, are narrow enough to function as levers of denial. block access to these nodes, and China cannot manufacture the advanced chips it needs for artificial intelligence, military modernization, and next-generation communications. But here is the complication Washington prefers not to advertise. China is not standing still. It is pouring billions into domestic alternatives. And while empirical data shows that China still lags significantly in leading-edge fabrication, its share of global wafer and integrated circuit trade actually declined during the early phase of the tech war. The trajectory of its patent filings, talent recruitment, and state-backed investment tells a different story. China is behind. China is also moving fast. The question is whether the walls being built are high enough and whether they will hold. In September 2023, Huawei quietly released a smartphone that sent shockwaves through Washington's semiconductor strategy. Inside was a 7-nanometer processor, fabricated by China's SMIC foundry, a company operating under some of the most severe technology sanctions ever imposed by the United States. The chip was not cutting edge by Taiwanese standards, but it was not supposed to exist at all. Its very presence proved that choke points can be partially worked around, that sanctions leak, and that denial is not the same as prevention. The market understood immediately. On announcement day, Huawei suppliers recorded abnormal stock returns of 1.5% to 2.5%. A clear signal that investors viewed sanction circumvention not as an anomaly, but as a viable commercial path. The cracks extend beyond China's own efforts. Research into German semiconductor firms reveals an uncomfortable truth for alliance cohesion. Many companies deeply embedded in the US technology ecosystem are simultaneously finding ways to maintain commercial ties with China's massive automotive and electronics markets. The Netherlands faces similar tensions. South Korea's memory giants cannot easily abandon their largest customer. Each ally calculates differently. Each has its own economic gravity pulling against Washington's unilateral controls. Meanwhile, inside Taiwan itself, the geopolitical pressure is producing a quieter but equally significant distortion. Firms facing escalating cross-strait tension have begun increasing inventory accumulation, stockpiling components not for efficiency, but for survival. Capital that should fuel innovation is being locked into warehouses. Research and development budgets compete with contingency reserves. Hiring slows as margins tighten under redundancy's weight. The island that makes the world's most advanced chips is slowly being forced to trade competitiveness for contingency. And the longer the tension persists, the higher that cost compounds. The instinct in Washington, Brussels, and Tokyo is clear. Bring the factories home. End the dependence. Build sovereignty in silicon. The data says this is a fantasy. A consensus drawn from over 200 studies confirms what industry insiders already know. Full onshoring of semiconductor manufacturing is effectively impossible. The costs are staggering. The talent pipelines do not exist at the required scale. The supplier ecosystems that took decades to build in Hsinchu and Hwaseong cannot be replicated by policy alone. Resilience requires redundancy and decentralization, building additional capacity in allied nations. It does not mean and cannot mean total nationalization of a fundamentally global technology. And here lies the deepest paradox of the entire chip war. The economic geography of electronics is demand-led. The assemblers are in Asia. The consumers are in Asia. The gravitational pull for manufacturing to remain close to its largest markets is immense. Policies designed to increase security, strict export controls, forced technology transfers, subsidy-driven relocation, may paradoxically increase fragility. When denied access to global tools, rivals do not simply stop. They build parallel systems with incompatible standards, fragmenting the innovation commons that made rapid technological progress possible in the first place. Taiwan calls its chip dominance the silicon shield, the theory that the world's dependence on its fabrication makes military aggression economically unthinkable. It is a shield built on concentration. And concentration, as every network analyst will tell you, is just another word for a single point of failure. Consider what that means in practical terms. A single natural disaster, a single military escalation, a single political miscalculation in the Taiwan Strait, and the production lines that supply processors for everything from cardiac monitors to fighter jets go dark. There is no backup. There is no second source. There is only the assumption that tomorrow will look like today. The future will not be a clean separation between East and West. It will be messy, defined by partial circumvention, regulatory gaps, alliance fractures, and unintended innovation responses. The chip war will not produce winners and losers in the traditional sense. It will produce a world more expensive, more fragmented, and more strategically anxious than the one it replaces. A semiconductor is smaller than a fingernail, and yet more complex than a city. It is the most consequential object humanity has ever manufactured, and we built an entire civilization on the assumption that it would always be available from anywhere at any time. That assumption is now perhaps the most dangerous bet in geopolitics. If this reshaped how you understand the power inside everyday technology, subscribe.